Finally, at long last, the fight was over. He could give up the family business. It was like living a dream. They would live happily ever after. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their life. And yet there she laid, dead in her wedding dress. He knew he never liked that man, but he had no idea he was a monster after all. Unsealing the locked basement, he took the tools of his ancestors, and he got his revenge. He had hoped that vengeance would have ended his pain, but all that was left was an empty void. To spare others the pain he went through, he knew what he had to do. Using the closely guarded secrets of his ancestors, he tore across Cyrodiil, wiping out all the vampires he could find. And when the last vampire crumbled into dust, he heard word of a new order in Skyrim. The Order of the Dawn Guard, and their fight against the vampires there. Not ready to end his crusade just yet, he travels north to Skyrim to end vampirism once and for all, so that his tragedy may never be repeated. A bow for hire, this former nobleman has sacrificed everything to become the light's vengeance against the vampires. Using his family's secret arts, he's already exterminated the weak vampires of Cyrodiil. Now the much more fearsome Volgahar vampires are next. This series is now Patreon funded. Go to patreon.com/Zhakaron to learn the benefits of being a patron. However, this series will always be free. Tested on Legendary Difficulty. Modlist after the character story. The Hunter of Virtuous Blood begins the game wearing red wedding robes, several bandoliers to increase his carry weight, a travel lantern, 2 pieces of jewelry to increase his archery, and an ebony crossbow repeater. He also begins the game with Cure Disease, Sun Cloak, Vampire's Bane, and Purgatory. You'll notice that both Sun Cloak and Vampire's Bane have an ability known as Chastise. When a target is affected by Chastise, that is when Purgatory can take effect. If the enemy is affected by Chastise and lower than 40% health, they will die instantly and explode. Otherwise, if they have a higher health percentage, they will lose 25% of their health. But Purgatory working is predicated on them being affected by either Suncloak or Vampire's Bane. You'll find that enemies afflicted by Suncloak and Vampire's Bane simultaneously will also take more damage from your crossbow. The crossbow itself is an antique ebony crossbow. It fires 7 shots provided you hold down the mouse button. If at any point during this time you let go of the mouse button, it will disengage and the reload animation will start. The reload animation takes the exact same amount of time regardless of whether or not you spent 7 bolts or 1 bolt. What this means is that you'd only disengage your attack in order to conserve ammo. There'd be no other point to it. Although he may eventually upgrade to a Daedric crossbow, this is the crossbow he will use for 99% of the game. Because he is so extremely specialized in anti-undead, going up against regular bandits can be a chore, and he uses poison on his bolts instead. Poison is applied only to the first shot in a chain of crossbow bolts. However, if you have a perk that increases the amount of uses you get out of poison, that will only take effect on the first shot of each volley. In other words, if you get 3 uses out of a single poison, then the first shot of the next 3 volleys you do will have their poison effect. But after that first shot, there is no poison applied to the other 6 bolts in the volley. Eventually, when he's progressed far enough in the Dawnguard quest, he'll be able to use the forge in Fort Dawnguard, fire, frost, and shock bolts, in addition to strong bolts and strongest bolts. Note that he cannot upgrade fire bolts into stronger fire bolts. He must craft a steel bolt into a strong steel bolt into a strongest steel bolt, and then he may enchant that bolt using the forge and a Atronach salt to convert them into fire bolts. And in general, while he'll probably just end up buying bolts in bulk off of the vendors in Fort Dawnguard, he will have the opportunity to upgrade and then enchant those bolts. If he gets his hands on other materials and he has the appropriate smithing perks, he will be able to craft those bolts as well. To Elven, to Orcish, from glass, to ebony, to dragonbone. All these bolts can be upgraded and enchanted. However, the hard ones to get his hands on are the silver bolts, which deal extra damage to undead, and with the proper perks can be enchanted with all kinds of really cool stuff. The last thing to note is, if you fire multiple shots and they don't hit your target, you will be able to use a special hotkey. The screen will turn black, and in the top corner of your screen you'll see that the bolts that you shot have been recovered. Furthermore, you will be able to recover all the bolts that you fire into your enemies. Although he will have a silver katana from the start to use as a fallback weapon, it is not advisable and is much weaker than his repeater, only really to be used when he runs out of bolts. This katana should be replaced almost immediately with the Dawnbreaker when he gains access to it. Now, the burning effect the Dawnbreaker does put on enemies does stack with Vampire Bane and Suncloak. Furthermore, if the target is killed with Purgatory while burning from the Dawnbreaker, he will explode twice, once from the Dawnbreaker and once from Purgatory. In other words, the Hunter's spells and the Dawnbreaker lend themselves well to one another. The Hunter of Virtuous Blood is a jerk, and by that I mean to say that he carries a ends justify the means mentality despite trying his level best to do what he feels is right. At the end of the day, he's very much a screw the rules, screw the law, screw what people think, I'm doing what's right, and that's all that matters. His goal is ultimately to protect the innocent, and he will do pretty much everything to achieve that. He has seen the prolific cycle of vampires and how they must feed, and in turn spread their disease to turn more people into vampires. He is therefore determined that their deaths are for the betterment of all of Tamriel. In the beginning, when it was just vengeance against the vampires, he felt empty. But now, joined with the Dawn Guard, he feels a specific calling. Seeing vampire attacks become commonplace, he has dedicated himself to protecting the citizens of Tamriel from that vampire menace. And his time as an aristocrat has taught him the voice of the Emperor, allowing him to be much more diplomatic. Having spent his family fortune during his crusade across Cyrodiil, he must now do the work of a common adventurer and mercenary in order to continue to pay for his vampire hunting. So he becomes a mercenary and monster slayer by profession, while staying a vampire hunter. Although he is not overly religious, he does pay homage to both Stendarr and Arkay. But this homage is seen more as superstition on his part than an actual state of worship. Although he does pay homage to Stendarr, he does not believe in Stendarr's stance against Daedra, and will side with Meridia and Azura, getting the Dawnbreaker and Azura's Star. In terms of magical trees, the only two he should be using are Restoration and Alteration. Relying on minions to take damage for him, he should feel obligated to learn a healing spell. In addition, he will want to learn all of the mage armor spells to better protect himself. He should join the College of Winterhold early in order to learn their secrets of restoration and alteration. Although he may join the companions for a little bit of coin, he will not drink the beast blood, and his path with them will end there. Although he does not care about the laws of either the Empire or Skyrim, he has his own code that he follows. And that code prevents him from joining either the Dark Brotherhood or the Thieves Guild. Paying for supplies, mercenaries to fight for him, and a countless amount of bolts will cost quite a bit of money. As a result, Skyrim's enemies such as the Forsworn, bandit troops, and more will become his enemies out of necessity. Although he will consistently have two followers with him, either mercenaries or members of the Dawn Guard, he will try to avoid having the same follower with him consistently for long periods of time. The long-lasting bonds between warriors that go beyond friendship are seen as a burden to him, and considering the sheer amount of death he's seen, he really wants to avoid losing anyone else precious to him. It is for that reason that he keeps people at arm's length. Now, he will eventually be forced to side with the vampire Serana, and he will tolerate her presence for a time. and eventually going through the trial of Ariel's bow with her, he will begin to see her as more than just another vampire. He will never truly come to terms with what she is, and will eventually convince her to cure her vampirism after Harkon is dead. Once the vampires are wiped out and he has moved on to other pursuits, he will learn to trust people a little more and keep a consistent set of followers from then on. However, it may be impossible for him to ever get close enough to actually marry somebody. His progressing the main quest should be delayed until after he has completed Dawnguard, and it is very possible after the Volgalhar vampires are wiped out that he would not give up his life of adventure and would choose to become a dragon hunter. And although he will continue to do bandit killing quests in order to pay for provisions, he doesn't actually like killing other humans. When he kills someone, he needs to know that that killing is either righteous or in self-defense. Tamriel was originally controlled by the Ayleid, or Wild Elves, and they were conquered by many powerful heroes, led by Queen Elysia, the first Dragonborn Emperor of Cyrodiil. But the humans who ruled over the Elysian Empire were not known as Imperials. They were a race that had been long oppressed by the Ayleid. They were known as the Needs. Unlike Redguards, Akaviri, or Atmorans, the Needs were native to Cyrodiil. They were perhaps the first race enslaved by the Ayleid. And unlike those other human races, the Needs were fairly weak. However, as bloodlines crossed with the other human races, a new race formed, known as Imperials, possessing some of the strengths of all the races to a vastly lesser degree. Simply put, Imperials are potential. Charismatic by nature, they can excel in magic, archery, or melee combat as they see fit, and are not predisposed to any of them. As Needs had more limited contact with the other races out on the fringes, Atmorans and Needs would become modern-day Nords, and the Ayleids surviving to the northwest would join with the Needs and become Bretons. However, before the time of the Empire, before the coming of the Ayleids, the Needs were a tribalistic culture. Because this was the time prior to Queen Elysia making the pact with Akatosh that split the mortal world off from that of the Divines in Oblivion, both Aedra and Daedra were known to manifest in Tamriel, in their full forms. Each tribe would have a priestess whom personally spoke to the Aedra whom their tribe worshipped. One tribe in particular worshipped Arkay, being a time before the splitting of Oblivion and Mundus. When the Daedra could walk freely, the priestess of Arkay was assaulted by Molag Bal.
When I was a priestess of Arkay, Molag Bal ravaged me and left me for dead.
This is where Molag Bal would first earn his name as the King of Rape.
A group of nomads tried to purify me with fire.
Elder, what do you believe happened to her?
Her body was mangled, rent apart by a terrible darkness. Its corruption is still on her. I can feel it.
Is it true her wounds healed on their own?
Yes, that is why I insisted we perform this rite at once.
Elder, the girl!
No, we're too late. No, back away.
She rose from the dead, a vampire, the first of her kind. She would be known as the Blood Matron, Lamai Bal. All the vampires in the Second Era can trace their blood back to Lamai Bal. And indeed, during the Second Era, she had an active role in the vampires, putting each new blood through an initiation ceremony, where they would agree to reject both Molag Bal and Arkay equally. However, witnessing the powers that Molag Bal could grant, many offered themselves up to Molag Bal. They erected shrines of him in every province, but they found that unless their soul was destined to do great things, such as possessing the destiny of a legendary hero, Molag Bal simply refused to speak to them. However, through the sacrifices of hundreds or thousands of innocents, they were able to get Molag Bal's attention. Those found worthy by Molag Bal would be taken to Cold Harbor, and upon being returned to Nirn, would be changed. They would be more than vampires, They would be lords of vampires. From High Rock to Hammerfell to Skyrim to Morrowind, these alternate bloodlines, not connected to Molag Bal, began to crop up over the ages. Over 6 of these bloodlines were known to have existed in High Rock and Hammerfell in the Molag Bay region, and no less than 3 factions were known to have existed in Morrowind. However, in Skyrim, a single vampire bloodline rose to dominance, known as the Volgohar Vampires. It's said that Lord Harkon sacrificed over 10,000 souls to Molag Bal to get his attention, and then had to endure trials in Cold Harbor in order to gain his royal bloodline. However, the sacrifice of 10,000 souls is not something that goes unnoticed, and the good peoples of Tamriel did rebel against Harkon. The priests of Arkay, the Crusaders of Stendarr, and a new order of civilians that later became known as the Dawn Guard, all rose up against him. It was for that reason he abandoned the mainland of Skyrim, content to rule his island. That is, however, when Harkon uncovered a certain prophecy, and his ambitions were renewed once again. Throughout the generations, the vampires led by Molag Bal would rise up, and they would be squashed by orders of vampire hunters. However, one particular order in the Third Era was not connected to the Crusaders of Stendarr or the Priests of Arkay, not connected to the Dawn Guard or any other large faction. For no other purpose than garnering support within the Imperial City, the Order of Virtuous Blood was formed. The man who founded the order was a very rich nobleman, and he spared no expense to obtain techniques, equipment, and mercenaries to fight for his order. And having the best vampire hunters under him did grant him great status within the Empire. However, vampires aren't stupid, and after several of them were slain by this order, they went underground. All its tools and techniques were passed to a high elf, who secretly maintained the order until the events of the Oblivion crisis, where it passed to a Breton. That Breton married, and 2 generations later, here stands the Hunter of Virtuous Blood. During the time after the Thalmor sacked the Imperial City, a new generation of vampires showed its fangs. The father of the Hunter of Virtuous Blood not only dealt with the threat, but then proceeded to teach his son the ways of vampire hunting. He and his father hunted together for some time before his father was unlucky and was killed. He carried on the fight until the vampires had once again gone underground. Meeting the woman of his dreams in the now rebuilding Cheydinhal, he decided it was time to give up the family business and have children of his own. That is, until the unthinkable happened. The Hunter's main weapon is covered under the Automatic Crossbow collection. This mod adds several repeaters to the game. Each one fires 7 bolts when the fire button is held down. The arrow recovery overhaul is going to allow you to go into the mod configuration menu and set a hotkey to pick up all your arrows. You can also set the recovery chance to 100%, something I highly recommend doing. Knock to Tip is going to change the physics of archery a little bit for the better. It's also going to allow you to craft a lot more bolts and arrows from brand new components you'll find off enemies or you can buy in stores. The overhaul we are using in this build is Percus Maximus. The reason we need Percus Maximus is because the Chastise effect, as well as the anti-undead restoration spells, the entire system, including Purgatory, is governed by Percus Maximus. Be sure to look up compatibility patches for any of the other mods you plan to use. Apocalypse the Magic of Skyrim is going to grant you access to not only a bunch of anti-undead spells, but a special spell known as Akado's Recital that will allow you to instantly recast any kind of mage armor you may have and Suncloak when entering combat. This is very similar to the Smart Cast mod, except it's done in a way that feels legitimate to the game. Harvest Overhaul increases the number of plants you get from each plant bush to a reasonable level. This is used because the hunter will be using poisons against non-undead enemies. Lock Overhaul is going to allow the hunter to bash open locks. You'll need to go into the mod configuration menu and enable lock bashing. However, using his crossbow, he'll simply be able to shoot the locks open, assuming his archery skill has progressed that far. The milestones for the various lock difficulties are 25, 50, 75, and 100. The bandolier that the hunter wears across his chest is handled by the Bandolier Bags and Pouches mod. The main reason he has these, other than aesthetics, is for the enhanced carry weight, specifically dealing with the ingredients for crafting more bolts. The final mod to pick up is Extensible Follower Framework. We're going to do this in order to get forced recruiting of Dawnguard members. Also, you'll want the Eloquent Reader mod. What'll happen is when you read a book, any book at all, you will actually get a minor progress towards your next speech skill up. So by reading a bunch of books, you get free speechcraft skill ups. Obviously, each book can only be read once, but it gives you the motivation to read all the books in the game. The reason why speechcraft skill is important for this character will be revealed in the character setup. The Hunter of Virtuous Blood is an Imperial, starting as a new member of the Dawnguard. Go ahead and hit the tilde key to open up the command console. Once the command console is open, type in the following codes. Entering these codes will place items in your inventory. Go ahead and equip and/or learn them. Once this is done, use the following help commands to gain another set of add item codes and add them in the same way. Once this is done, open the command console and type help, ebony, crossbow. You notice a list of 3 crossbows come up. Use the page up key on your keyboard in order to scroll up past all the other crossbows on the list until you reach the top and you see just a plain ebony crossbow. Getting anything but the regular ebony crossbow is not recommended, as you will have the opportunity to upgrade the ebony crossbow in different ways as you progress through. Once you've got the add item code, type player, period, add item, the code, and then space 1. And that will add the crossbow to your inventory. Once this is done, exit the room you started in, turn right, and somewhere in the fort you will see this man. Go ahead and hit escape while the mouse is over him. Go to mod configuration. Under the EFF or Extensible Follower Framework, go to settings, go to fix actor. This will put him into a faction that allows him to be recruited, and then force recruitment. Now hit the use key on him. A wheel will pop up with commands. Go ahead and select command. Go ahead and select more. And under importance, select essential. This member of the Dawnguard is now a part of your team and will travel with you. In the wheel, you can customize his equipment, his inventory, teach him spells, and much, much more. Under the more commands, you can change his aggression level, have him collect things, and even train him if you level up so that he will level up with you. In addition, if you want him to take on a different combat style, you can at any time, although I will recommend always having him as a warrior. Thus, he will tank for you. Other members of the Dawnguard should be recruited in the same way. Due to the fact that you are a prestigious vampire hunter, it makes sense that they would lend you their support. However, as per the character, you should definitely seek out mercenaries and other people who will also ally themselves to your cause. In an ideal setup, you will have at least 2 minions. The last thing you're going to want to do is type help disarming charisma. You'll notice 2 perks and a spell. Ignore the spell and type player, period, add perk, and then the 2 codes. The first one and then the second code. The Disarming Charisma perk allows you, while wearing a piece of expensive clothing, which your robe is, to cause weapon damage to be reduced by half of your speech skill. So if you had 50 speech skill, you'd have 25% damage reduction. At 100 speech skill, 50% damage reduction. This will protect you, as this character will wear no armor whatsoever. Alright, so this build video was noticeably shorter than the others. Not a big deal. Damn, those are loud bolts. Either way, You notice there's been a trend lately of good, then evil, then good, then evil, and so on. Now you notice I missed that deer a lot, so 7 shots, unfortunately, were wasted on that. What I then do is I hit my hotkey to recover my arrows. It'll pick up all the ones that weren't on the corpse, I believe. I'll check on the corpse itself. I should get the rest of them. Yep, there they are. I call them arrows, but they're bolts. Either way, I actually developed a little story in my head about how the champion of Cold Harbor was basically going to conquer the world. How he was going to bring a vampire army into Cyrodiil, use Ariel's bow to darken the sun, and shortly thereafter basically conquer Cyrodiil, destroying the dragon statue Martin Septim turned into, and basically opening the gates. Being a dragonborn, it's possible he could break the coven with Akatosh. You know, I thought about that whole thing of the champion of Cold Harbor doing that. But then I thought, what if he was on the verge of victory, and he got shot in the head with a crossbow with an exploding bolt attached, and it blew up his head? You know, anticlimactic much? And that's pretty much where this concept came from, is an anti-champion of Cold Harbor. It just felt right to do. I originally wanted to have him, you know, fire a single shot and it would be super powerful, but that wasn't good enough for Legendary Difficulty. And I like to, if possible, make my builds viable for Legendary. Now, this guy with his 7 crossbow repeater is definitely Legendary viable. In fact, you'll find him vastly overpowered for lower difficulties. But I think that's A-okay. Now, doing all my tests on Legendary Difficulty, I can say right now that against undead, he is supremely powerful, but against non-undead, like a super high-level bandit, he had some trouble. And so what I figured was the character would use poisons. And you can see I crafted tons of them, from paralysis poisons to damage health poisons. And I found that when he fired a poison out of his crossbow, what would happen is the first shot of the volley, so say 7 shots, only the first shot would get poisoned, but then because of the perk in Percus Maximus, which I'll go over right now, it's under Alchemy, I believe? Yes. It's this distillation perk, where poison is applied to 2 additional attacks. So basically, every first shot of 3 volleys will get the poison, and the additional shots will just do damage, which is pretty okay by me. Now I'm recovering my arrows really quick, and now I'm ready to talk to the dog. Alright, so for that guy in that chair, he's human, so we kill him with crossbow bolts. But the vampire up there, so the idea is we hit him with Vampire's Bane, then Purgatory, and you can see the way it immediately lost 25% of its health. And the idea is each additional hit causes it to lose more and more health. Now we hit it with the Dawnbreaker, you can see it's burning again. Hit it with another Vampire's Bane. Hit it with one more Vampire's Bane. Switch to your crossbow while it's still burning from everything, and basically take it down. And it takes additional damage while it's under the influence of all those effects. It's very easy. If you don't have enough magicka to finish it off with a Purgatory, then while it's burning from everything else, hit it with your crossbow. The crossbow will do massive damage. Now once again, bring out the Dawnbreaker, hit him with Vampire's Bane, hit him with the Dawnbreaker while they're burning, switch to the crossbow, and take them down. Combo-based system allows you to annihilate undead very easily. But yeah, this guy wouldn't join the Thieves Guild, he wouldn't join the Dark Brotherhood, he wouldn't do the Cannibal Ring quest. There's a lot of stuff in this game he would not do. And there's no way in hell he'd join Harkon's court. But that's not even a consideration, because when you start as a new member of the Dawn Guard, that's all taken care of for you. Now as for this Nightmaster Vampire, once again, tried and true, just hit him with Vampire's Bane, hit him with Dawnbreaker, When he's less than 40% health, we get to see Purgatory. And Purgatory. Bam. And that is how the Nightmaster Vampire died. Now, I mentioned that he would be fighting dragons after he killed Lord Harkon, but that's really up to you if you want to make him Dragonborn. But if you decide to not take him the Dragonborn path, I recommend Vigilant, a new quest mod. It's, I believe, 2 parts of it are done, and it's going to be a 3-part story. I know part 1 was just supposed to be the tutorial, but it was bigger than most quest mods. Either way, its theme fits a man such as him. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quick save it and fight these elves here. Hello. Other archers are kind of hilarious because they'll do like little pot shots at you and you can just take them down pretty easily. Now I know there was a lot of clamoring when I was doing my tests earlier to take this guy werewolf, and it's definitely an option, although I feel that that would break his purity, as it were. You know, giving him the beast blood just doesn't seem right for this somewhat holy crusader. I know he's not a cleric, but he certainly does have the qualifications to be one. And people question, you know, him being good, considering he's killing. But he's killing for a purpose. And let's face it, all these vampires, in Skyrim anyway, are pretty much all freaking evil. Now, if you notice what just happened, I released some shock bolts. Shock bolts can be recovered off of their corpses. However, in general, if they hit a wall or something, they disappear. You notice I just recovered 41 bolts over the course of that battle. And that's pretty much the way Legendary Difficulty is going to go. You're going to be pumping hundreds of bolts into your enemies. Now, by the time you progressed far enough in the Dawnguard main quest, you will have 2 people at Fort Dawnguard, each selling 200 bolts apiece, meaning every trip back to Fort Dawnguard after, I believe it's 48 or 72 hours, something like that, have passed, you'll be able to pick up another 400 bolts. So, with a follower to pick up loot for you, you shouldn't have any trouble. Just sell loot to them, and then in exchange, buy their bolts. And, you know, if you need to, wait around a couple days, pass some time, and then get another 400. So, with 800 bolts on your character, you should be good for pretty much any quest, especially since you can recover your bolts. Now, some people have complained about extensible follower framework, and they absolutely cannot stand the fact that your followers go invisible and get muffled on their feet. So basically they are unable to be detected, leaving it entirely up to your skill whether you're seen or not. They don't like that. They hate that noise when you go into stealth. So what you can do in that case is you can go to mod configuration, you can go to extensible follower framework, and under features, stealth invisibility, you can turn it right off. If you don't like that big wheel and you want to bring everything back to dialogue, that's how you do it, right in menu mode. But I prefer standard. I like the wheel a lot. It isn't immersive, but at the same time, it is functional as all hell. I also like the fact that you can tell them to wait somewhere, and it will say they're waiting for you. They become a quest objective, so say you forget where you parked them, which that concept in itself is hilarious. They got a quest marker over their head. Another fancy thing you can do is you can go to command, you can go to more, and you can go to residence, and you can set their residence. So if you hit clear, their residence will reset to wherever that NPC is supposed to live. But you could go into the Bannered Mayor, set their residence there, and now when you dismiss them, they will go live in the Bannered Mayor. But in general, this character is very uncomplicated, and I designed him to be uncomplicated. He's got a basic backstory. His order, the Order of Virtuous Blood, was a thing in Oblivion. You basically got to kill the leader of the Order of Virtuous Blood because it turns out he was a vampire and he was using the Order to basically kill off his competition and keep his competition dead. But in Oblivion, you can have a choice. You can either kill him or you can believe him and kill the Breton. I'm going off of the continuity where he was slain and the Order changed hands to the Breton. But the character is fairly straightforward. You adventure for coin and riches and all the stuff a mercenary does, but anytime you see an undead, you make it die real quick with your anti-undead powers. He is what is known as a specialized character. He is not awesome, although he will get better as you progress in restoration and alteration. And if you actually look through skills, this part is fairly important. In alteration, it's highly recommended you get a Cotto's Recital, use it for oak flesh, ebony flesh, iron skin, whatever. Just go up the tree, get mage armor, second skin, and finally Arcana body. It basically gives you maximum damage reduction regardless. Now you notice that I feel weaker as the sun rises. I have been infected with Sanguine Vampiris. But this character is never in danger of becoming a vampire because he knows Cure Disease straight from the start. He just casts that spell, and we look back on our magic, no disease. Now, out of necessity, I'm going to be changing the format I do the character builds. I'm going to be doing separate lore videos, somewhat like if you check out my Origin of the Elder Scrolls Universe video, which I have on this channel, I'm going to be doing more lore videos like that. And instead of doing a huge lore segment in the middle of the character story, that history thing, I'm going to be cutting out the history section. I'm just going to be leaving in the character backstory. And I will probably reference a particular lore video when I'm talking about stuff, but I'm going to basically split them off and do a character build, a lore video, a character build, a lore video. It won't take any longer to do it. It's just going to shorten both videos and make it so that you could search for, say, the Origin of the Elder Scrolls series, what is Alduin, what is the Psijic Order, these things that I plan to make individual videos of. And I realize that we have right now lore segments contained within a character build, and that's okay. Unfortunately, one, it's delaying the speed at which I can do the character builds, and two, it's delaying the speed at which I put out lore, because there are lots of topics I'd just like to expound upon. So in general, character builds will be about a half hour, and then on top of that I'll have like 20-minute lore videos. That's the plan anyway. But as for this guy, I really think he's my second most fun character build that I've done. The first being the Knight of the Nine, the third being the Champion of Cold Harbor. And I'm going to strive to continue to introduce interesting game mechanics into each build. But regardless, I always intend on having the character rooted in Elder Scrolls lore in one way or another. They will have a personal backstory section in the character build, but it might reference a lore video that I've done separately. I want to do the lore videos about 20-25 minutes in length, just talking about, say, the Origin of the Elder Scrolls universe, Alduin, the Psijic Order, things of that nature. Those of you who come here just for the lore can check out my lore videos, but at the same time, my character builds are still going to have lore in the character backstory. So it's a little bit of everything, but I feel like searchability is kind of an important thing, and if I keep everything lumped up together, people are going to have a difficult time finding where I talk about Akatosh and Alduin. They're going to have a hard time finding where I talk about the Snow Prince and the fate of the Snow Elves. Things like that. My Let's Plays are going to continue just because they are super easy to make. I get home from work, I just shut my brain off, talk in front of the camera while I play the game for an hour. It's very, very easy. But I can already tell you that the next character build I intend on doing is going to be the Psijic Outcast. And I routinely post on my Patreon page the next character builds I intend on doing, what I'm thinking about doing. And even if you're not a patron, you can actually create a Patreon account and chat there in the public posts that I make. Obviously, there are private posts just for patrons, but when I'm talking about the next character build that I'm kind of planning on doing, thinking about, I'm going to try to make those public posts more often than not. Only the early look at the character builds and lore videos will be private. At least that's the plan for now. I'm going to leave you all to do some vampire hunting. See y'all next time.